Normally I don't need a microphone, but I was MC for my friend Stag and Doe last night. Stag and Doe just before St. Patrick's Day. Just about lost my voice, so my apologies if the voice goes a little low. My book is available. Let me do what I normally do in front of audiences. We'll cover up the bottom. It is a book about the CBC, CBC Exposed it's called. It exposes lots of the problems at the state broadcaster, which I think lie at the heart of so many of the problems in the country, and I put forward that the solution is to sell CBC. I want to bring up a tidbit that was brought to my attention on byline probably within the last week or two. I'll throw out a number, and some of you I'm sure will correct me, but the official number being floated around for what we spend on official bilingualism is $2.1 billion a year. Correct? Close? Rough? That's the part without all the stuff that's hidden? Okay.
That's what they'll admit to.
More than what we spend now on the Canadian Army. Because the Army's about to get a big cut. Not the military as a whole, but the land forces portion. We are spending more on bilingualism than we're spending on the land portion of our defenses. Shocking. We're just about spending more on the state, or as much on the state broadcaster as we are on the armed forces, on the Army portion of our armed forces. What kind of messed up priorities do we have when that is the emphasis of our government? It's confusing. Beth likes to send me emails talking about our inalienable rights, that we've got rights and that this can include language rights. I think that the Supreme Court has shown that that's not true. I wish it were true, but they've decided otherwise, and our politicians have decided that they will keep it that way. Whether it's the Immune decision of several years ago, and that was a case that didn't get a lot of attention outside of Quebec, was Francophone parents that said, you know what, we want to send our kids to English schools. Why do you have a law stopping us? You shouldn't be allowed to tell us what language our kids must be educated in. And they went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, you know, yeah, it kind of violates your rights, but in a free and democratic society, it does it in a way that we think is okay. And unfortunately, time and again in our society, we have judges that say, yes, what the government is doing violates your rights, but it's allowable. It's due to the Section 1 of the Charter, the you have your rights until we say you don't clause. That's what I call Section 1. And that's what happens with so many of the issues that you in this room care about, is that government will do something and you'll say, well, hold on, I'm a Canadian. I have rights. And they say, oh, yeah, but we don't care. And then you go to court. And then the court says, yeah, you do have rights. And maybe at a lower court they'll say, we'll overturn this law. But then it gets appealed and it goes to the Supreme Court, or in some cases doesn't even make it to the Supreme Court because they won't hear you. And they just say, sure you have those rights, but in a free and democratic society we can take them away. That's wrong. But it happens time and again, whether, as I said, in the Immune decision in Quebec, the Whatcott decision recently. The Whatcott decision actually says truth doesn't matter. Now, some of my critics will say, well, you're wrong, Lily. It doesn't say truth doesn't matter. No, what it says is that truthful statements can be hateful and therefore can't be immune from prosecution. What? And that's the part of the decision. I mean, at this point, I don't even care what Bill Whatcott Flyer said, because Bill will deal with his own fight, and he's got lots of support. But going forward, this decision will be used. I'm being told by people that say they're a lot smarter than me, and they probably are, but that means that they don't think. They're telling me, oh no, this decision will not be used for anything else. This decision won't set precedent. Wrong. The Whatcott decision said, truth doesn't matter, intent doesn't matter, and you don't have to do harm. And you can still be in violation of our human rights apparatus. So what do we do? Well, at the federal level, a bill to get rid of the crazy portion of our Human Rights Act passed the Commons. but it's been stuck in the Senate for 9 months now, I believe, and it's not moving. So you need to call your senators, or any senator from Ontario, and demand that they pass it. You need to put pressure on them. And they're not used to getting phone calls. That's one small thing to reestablish some sanity to our rights system in this country. But long term, what do you do? Well, we need to start electing better people. Sir John A. Macdonald once famously said, if you want a better cabinet, send me better wood. Are we sending good wood to Ottawa? No. Are we sending good wood to Queen's Park?
No. No, we're sending a lot of naughty pine.
We're sending driftwood is what we're sending. We're sending driftwood.
Exactly.
People that just go along with whatever. And the worst part are people that say they're conservatives. And then they get in and they've railed against something. They will have railed against something that the Liberals did. And then they get in, or they look like they might get in. And you say, great, so you're going to get rid of that thing that you said was horrible and would be awful for the province? Well, you know, it's the law now.
Yeah.
What we don't need are people that want to conserve the Liberal status quo. We need people that are going to change things. We need people that are going to be radicals in a different way. They're going to be progressives in reverse. That's what we need. The progressives have been inching forward step by step by step, changing this country. And there's a lot of people in this room saying, I want my country back. We've got to elect people that are going to repeal the insanity that the Liberals have been putting in. So it doesn't matter what party they're in, because you can get a progressive in the conservative movement, especially if they're still in the progressive conservative party, which I call the push me, pull me party. You know, you can be conservative or you can be progressive. You cannot be both. But maybe you will find some good conservatives in that party. I'm not saying write them off. I'm just saying check with the person and know who you are backing. And make sure that they're willing to be a progressive in reverse, that they're willing to be radical enough to repeal some of this insanity. Now, use an American example to show that even getting people from the same party but finding better ones can have a huge impact. There was a debate recently in the U.S. Senate on whether the U.S. president had the authority to kill an American citizen on American soil who was not involved in combat with a drone. I'm shocked that this had to be a debate. But Rand Paul, senator for Kentucky, had asked the question several times, had written to the Attorney General because he'd heard statements coming from the White House that, yeah, they could use drones to kill an American on an American soil when he's not actively picking up arms and fighting against his own country. And he said, so you're telling me that you can send in a drone strike and kill somebody sitting in a cafe eating breakfast?
Right in here.
And they kind of said, well, yeah, you know, sure, I mean, yeah, we could. And he debated this. And he got support from other senators like Ted Cruz and Tim Scott out of North Carolina, and some of the new, younger conservatives. And then you had guys like John McCain who called him a wacko bird and sided with Barack Obama. They're both in the Republican Party. John McCain and Rand Paul are both in the Republican Party, but John McCain wanted to stand with Barack Obama, saying it's okay to kill your own citizens without trial, without due process, when they're not actively taking up arms. Nobody denies that if you pick up a rifle and go and try and storm Parliament Hill, they don't have to read you your rights and give you a trial. They're going to take you out. But should they be able to send a drone strike into this room and take you all out because you're radicals advocating something different? No. So that had to be the debate. Those senators that I just mentioned all replaced existing Republican senators who would have sided with McCain before. So even changing people inside the party can change things dramatically. So whatever party you support, are you active in their nomination process? At the federal level, I'll tell you, you're not happy with your local MP, they all have open nomination this next election. 2015, not a single one of them is protected. They were all protected during the minority period. You can challenge them all now and either force them to be conservative or replace them.
I want to build a little bit on what Brian was saying earlier. First of all, he made some very good points, and he talked about how to go about getting people into office. You know, the kind of people who are going to be, I love this phrase, progressives in reverse, because quite frankly, I am sick to death of progressives. Progressives have made more messes that we have to run around trying to stomp out since Trudeau than I think in the previous 2,000 years of human history. I'm being a little bit over the top, but the point is, when you look at, we have all these spot fires. We have assaults on property rights. We have assaults on language rights. The whole reason this group exists in the first place is to rectify a problem that Pierre Trudeau and his charter and all those kind of things and his attitudes, his gift to the country, if you will, caused. So now we have people who had never otherwise been at odds with each other, fighting each other tooth and nail over something as basic and as simple as language. Okay, so we have that. You have, in any culture, there are people who learn to get along with each other, or they'll sort it out, they'll knock heads, and eventually the dust settles and they learn to get along. That's the human condition. This is forced and it's artificial. So, okay, so how do we do this? Well, the first thing you have to figure out, I think that one of the most important things is to define real leaders, or real leadership. What is it? Because Brian is saying we got to elect good people. Well, how do you know when you're talking to somebody who is a good people? When you look back through history at some of the great leaders, okay, whether it's Caesar Augustus, whether it's Winston Churchill, whether it's Diefenbaker, MacDonald, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher.
Laurier.
Fine. Well, Laurier, MacDonald, you pick whoever it is. But the point is they all bear several things in common. They had an attitude that their word was their bond. It wasn't all that long ago in the human experience that when you bought or sold land, it was done with a handshake and a little piece of dirt transferred between the two parties, and that was all that was required. You didn't need to have long contracts where everybody knew exactly what the responsibilities of the other person were. That's the root of common law. Liz will talk a little more about that, I'm sure, when she gets up here in about 2 days. You think I'm kidding? Anyway, I am, believe me, I am. But the point I want to make is that in real leadership, they have this idea that your word is your bond. So when you want to see that attitude reflected in your politicians, the very first thing you have to do is have that attitude yourself. You have to, when you give your word that you will be somewhere, or you want someone to be on time, you better be there on time too. You have to have the qualities. If you take a look at Canadian values, what are they? Honesty, integrity, a sense of fair play, a sense of your word is your bond, the idea of self-sacrifice, putting others before yourself. These are the values that built the country. And they're across the board from every race and creed and color that ever came to this country and called it home and worked to build it. Those are the common things that hold us together. So if we want our politicians to have those things, we'd better have them first. Because that's how you'll recognize somebody who is worthy of voting in office. They'll look just like us. Because we have those values that we value. Like the thing that drives me crazy is when a politician gets up and, as Brian pointed out, promises the moon. Then when they get into office, either somebody says, you know that promise you made? You can't keep it. Because you got to toe the party line. Or they find out the economics behind what they were promising are so out of whack that the only kind of person who could ever pass or promise and then fulfill it is Dalton McGuinty. Because he's got no basis in reality in the first place. Just look at the Green Energy Act. Okay, you've got all this stuff. So what happens is if you promise something, you better be ready to deliver on it. You better make sure that come hell or high water, if you promise that you're going to deliver 100 cords of wood and a pizza every Wednesday for the next 10 years to your neighbor, you'd better do it. Because the other side of that coin is if you can't do it, don't promise it. I would rather vote for a politician any day of the week who says, you know what, guys? We have had people promise you a bridge where there is no river. They'll build the bridge and dredge the river. But we didn't need the bridge. So they spent all kinds of money they didn't need to spend, and now look at the mess we're in. I'm not going to do that. The only thing I will promise is that when I am elected, if you choose to elect this individual, then you can count on me to have your interest in the front of my mind, so that when I'm doing the business of the country or the province or the township, whatever level of government they're running for, your interests will be at the front of my mind, not mine. Because it's public service, not public service. And that is how we will make the changes that Brian's talking about. But we first have to instill them back within ourselves, within our children. But you have to take that message and apply it. You need to go to these meetings that Brian's talking about, the meetings where you select the candidates. And you need to grill them really hard. That selection process should be the most difficult thing any prospective politician ever goes through. Because if we can make it so rough on them, and I'm saying this with all due respect, okay, I don't want to crucify people, but I want to know who we're voting for. And then watch their reaction. It's their body language you're watching for, not what they say. Do they start doing this and go, well, I see your point, but then again, no, that kind of thing is a jellyfish. We got enough of those. But you want somebody to stand up, even if you don't like the answer, but is willing to stand up and look you in the eye and say, this is what I believe in. Because then at least you know, if he's gone through that or she's gone through that process, when they get to Queen's Park, there's nothing they can do to them that's going to be worse than what happened at the selection committee meeting, or however that process is done. So that's the winnowing that needs to go on with candidates. And until and unless that happens, not much else is going to change. But the bottom line I'm trying to get across, folks, and I'll wrap up with this, is if we really want to make changes at any level of government, we must elect people who have the values of self-sacrifice, fairness, honesty, integrity. But in order to identify those people, we have to have them ourselves. And once we do, then it'll be easy, because they'll be merely a reflection of us. Thank you.
Easiest thing in the world for a politician to do is say yes. Yes, let's screw over the majority English speakers because it's the right thing to do. And because we're the majority, it shows that we're generous. Or yes, let's tax the crap out of the people who work the hardest to give to the people who work the least. Because, well, you're rich or you've got something, it's the right thing to do. The hardest thing for someone to say is no. Without question, it's the hardest thing for someone to say. And that's what we've been saying. That's what everyone in this room has been saying for the longest time. No. And we've been taking it on the chin. It's really hard to fight against the establishment. They've got the money, our money. They've got the power because we elect them into positions of power, and they won't give it up for anything. I have met some extremely decent lawyers of high moral fabric, but most lawyers are scum. Judges are lawyers, and that's who we're dealing with. So we lost our language case against Russell, not because we were wrong, not because they were right, but because the lawyers who are judges said that our rights are being violated, but it's the right thing to do. Now let me tell you how scummy they were. They didn't even go to Section 1, which is the notwithstanding clause. They just said it's the right thing to do, based on nothing. The Court of Appeal said the exact same thing as Superior Court. It's the right thing to do, even though we took away the rights and freedoms of the majority. It's the right thing to do. The Supreme Court of Canada decided not even to hear this case, even though the Russell decision violated all of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence. They didn't want to hear this case. They didn't even say it's the right thing to do. They didn't give us an explanation. They just decided it's not worthy of the highest court of the land. So now, no one really knows, but until it's challenged again somewhere else, if it can be challenged again, forced bilingualism is the law of Canada. So how do we say no? Where do you go when all of your venues have been closed to you? You can't go to the politicians because they don't want to know. In our very first attempt to pass a resolution standing up for Canada's rights and freedoms, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in South Stormont, my Member of Parliament, Guy Lauzon, said he can't come to the vote on the resolution because it's not his mandate. Because it's too controversial. Imagine a Member of Parliament sworn to protect our Charter of Rights and Freedoms who says that our rights and freedoms are too controversial. So forget the politicians, and the higher up you go, forget them the most. So we go to the courts because we were born and raised to believe in justice. In 1982, Trudeau gave us the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by taking away our rights and freedoms. So where do we go? So we went to the Ottawa Superior Court, where a French activist judge came up with the first ruling. Sure, you lost your rights and freedoms, but don't worry about it. It's the right thing to do. So we went to the Court of Appeals, where there was a demand for 3 bilingual judges. No reason. The entire case was heard in English, even though Jean-Serge over there and myself had agreed to hear it in French. We both speak French and English. It was heard only in English. But they demanded 3 bilingual judges because there'll be a proclivity towards bilingualism. Got wiped out 3-0. It takes courage to say no. Tammy Hart is here, Deputy Mayor of South Stormont. She has real courage.
Here, here.
The Mayor of South Stormont, Brian McGillis, he showed real courage. All the councillors of South Stormont, even though they had tremendous doubts about signing a resolution supporting our freedoms, our right to speak the language of our choice, to post signs in the language of our choice, they had doubts. But in the final moment, they had courage. And we passed the first resolution guaranteeing that no one will take away our freedoms to post a sign in the language of our choice, whether it is English or French or any other language. That took courage. They said no. We brought the resolution to the town where I live, South Glengarry. They wouldn't even hear it. They finally voted not to vote on it. The reason being, it was too negative. Imagine standing up and supporting our rights and freedoms. It's too negative. I guess none of them had grandfathers or fathers who served overseas fighting for the freedoms of others and fighting for the freedoms that we enjoy right here. They are truly bastards. These people are cowards. These people are my definition of un-Canadian. And they have to be gotten rid of. We're not going to get rid of them by re-voting the same bad actors in over and over and over again, or going to the judges. It's not going to happen. So we took our fight for our resolution to other markets. We took it to Jocelyn, a little town up in the Sioux. They said no too. and they voted unanimously to make sure that our freedoms, their freedoms, the freedom of expression is guaranteed in a little town called Jocelyn. If you want to see that resolution, just raise your hands for a second and Ann will pass it around. Already done. I want you to know from experience who's responsible in our family, Ann or myself. Jocelyn is great news because they're so far removed from the fight. They're not in our neighborhood. Yet they understood how important it is to fight for freedom of expression. Now, if you want to know the real exciting news, between now and the end of the month, 13 more townships are going to sign that resolution. And by the time we're done, and I use the word we are done, we will get hundreds of townships right across Ontario to sign that resolution and shove it in the face of the politicians and the courts and Franco activists who want to take away our rights.
Yeah!
There are only two words that I want to use besides think about it.
Remember, there are ladies present.
Waiting for silence.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. The two words to everyone in this room is thank you.
I am the general manager of the Greater Ottawa Truckers Association. I absolutely got the job because I ran for mayor in Russell. I ran at the last minute because of the fact that I couldn't apply to be a grader operator in my little community of Russell. So I ended up running, and you know, I really didn't have a chance, but I did what I could. I did it more for making a little bit of noise, and Ken Hill, the person that split the vote to install the signed bylaw, broke the vote. He made it 3-2. He beat me by only 4 votes. So, you know, it is what it is, a little bit of consequence there. Moving snow for the city of Ottawa, there was 32 companies that came in from Quebec that were allowed to be equal to an Ontario operator to move snow. It wasn't like they were coming in and being cheaper. They worked for the same dollar rate that I had negotiated and do so on an annual basis. We went in there to tell them that we have sufficient amount of assets in Ontario to look after the snow. There was no need to bring in the Quebecer. What we had a meeting with the mayor. We told them our plight. They said, we're going to work on it. We're going to get you meetings with the Ministry of Labour. Linda Jeffries at the time was the Ministry of Labour for the province. Everything was good. Finally, at the end of the meeting, he said, we got to keep this out of the media. I get a call a week and a half later. The Auditor General report's coming out, and we got to give you a heads up, Ron. We're going to go to tender. We're going to tender the truck. In other words, the Great Ottawa Trucker. Go to hell. We're going to open it up. And Eli El Chantieri, I'll never forget, he says, if a Quebecer's cheaper, they may get the work. And I said, you're going to have a war. And then I also warned them all. I said, number one, you've just put, you're making it so uncompetitive for an Ontario company to compete with a Quebec company. They're going to likely be able to come in cheaper and get the work, but you're going to have a war. So they had to give me a call, and I got a call from Jeff Burns, Chief Procurement Officer from the city, an hour before Auditor General's report was going to be released, saying that they could save $630,000 in snow removal. So again, we have a meeting with them, and I said, you know what, that number is absolutely, I don't believe that number. I think it's false. I asked them a question, is that the whole department, roads department, encompassing the savings that could be realized? They didn't really know. What they said to me, they agree, but when the Auditor General says something, they have to suck hole up to the guy and do whatever he wants, whether it's right or wrong. It's not like I can schedule an appointment to have backhoes do a job. When Mother Nature snows, it is what it is. It's going to come. It could come for 3 days, unannounced. It could come tomorrow. We're moving snow. So it's not like we're all sitting there waiting.
I said to them, if they switch to a tender process, what you're going to have is you're going to have 10 of the cheapest guys in the town putting in. What you're going to do is you're going to run into the problem the 11th, 12th, and 13th may not get work all winter, because if it doesn't snow much, the first 10 guys are going to get work every single day.
Yeah.
But I said, when you get a catastrophic snowstorm like we've had this year, the 11th, 12th, and 350th guy, which they have on the list right now, they're not going to make it worthwhile to have their licenses, put license on the truck, insurance and all that. They're better off to park them. And I said, you will have a biggest incident that you'll ever realize in this city of Ottawa. But they don't seem to care. Here they are, they support 350 trucking companies, as Shirley knows, in this community. Everybody gets anywhere. They've gotten around 15 to 16 shifts this year. Really a little bit of flavor. Everybody gets a little bit of the piece of the pie to sustain their operations until they move into the spring when it gets busier. What they want to do is they want to take that back. My fear is now, I'll get somebody from out of town that has 70, 80 trucks, shoves all of our local taxpayers aside for the sake of saving a couple of bucks. And I'll never forget what Watson said in there when I said, I asked him two things. Mr. Watson, you got to fill in some blanks for me. What is the focus for bringing all these Quebecers and letting them move snow, letting them work for the city of Ottawa? Because there's a tremendous amount of people that work for the city of Ottawa from the city of Gatineau that come over here, and I asked them, where's the net benefit? Where's the net benefit of a trucker from Quebec coming over here? They don't hire here, they don't buy fuel here, they don't buy their tax, they don't do there's no net benefit. But what the city plays, they have what they call, from 1999, the Discrimination Act. And they shove that right in my face, which means they cannot discriminate against creed, all the crap there, and including geographical area. Which means if I go up and I want a job for the city of Ottawa, I wouldn't get one because I don't speak French, but notwithstanding, say I was bilingual, I went in and a Quebecer came in, we would be equal to get that job. And I also learned that there's a tremendous amount of department heads that are from Quebec. So who are they going to hire?
Yeah.
They're going to hire. So what we're doing is we're fighting the fight right now. We're not going to back down. My son, 21, got an honors in firefighting in paramedics. He's an OCP instructor. He doesn't speak French in Russell, and he went for an interview, and he honors in firefighting. And he wasn't the right guy. You know, you're just not what we're looking for. My son just paid 10 grand of his own money to be trained as fireman. But we get friends in there that have no idea what they're doing. How much is it costing the city to train, or the town to train each one of these people?
22,000.
22 grand each. But here's the problem. My daughter, I tell them all, you don't have to get involved in this fight because you're going to get blackballed in this community, especially in Russell. Leave it to me. But it was funny when my daughter said the other day, she goes, oh, Dad, you know, we're a lot more peaceful, we're a lot more accepting and all that. And that's what they're doing to our kids. They're allowing us.
That's why we homeschool.
That's why we homeschool. Nick, there you go, Nick. But that's the problem. What they're doing is they're softening our kids now. I'm so sick. No disrespect for Jack McLaren, but I'm sick of how to live, how to do this, how to do this. I was brought up a certain way, but now they say I've got to be this, I got to be boom, boom, boom. You know what? I just don't subscribe to that way.
There's no more
I get called a bigot all the time. So, bar and bigot, if that's what it does to say, you know what, I got to push back, then you know what? Because what they do is they throw that name at you to quiver. Ooh, I'm not that way, I'm going to go away. No, I've gone past that. We had one member who bought a truck in Ontario, bought the box in Quebec. Had the box delivered to Ontario, it was put on. 4 months later, he has paint peeling off the back of the thing, and he's going to drive it a couple of miles in, Nick, to go get it fixed. And he was told, no, you can't. You have to have it towed in. You're not allowed to drive it in there. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We've had guys over there work, got stopped 7 times in one day. And yet, do you think anybody in the city of Ottawa is standing up and saying, you know, it is, you know.
It's a province also.
Correct. And here's another thing. The next time somebody proposes to build a bridge into Quebec, we got to stop it because it's all, 94% of the people come this way in the morning and 94 go the other way. They're plugged. The bridges to Quebec are busy because they're plugged with everybody coming from there over to here to work. For our city, for our feds. They're allowed to come over here to work for feds, but this city has to stop. We have to change the Discrimination Act because we are the ones being discriminated. Thank you.
I'll give you a little rundown on what's happening with government, which is always exciting, and will just cheer you up so much, I know. A little bit about election and a couple of local things with the City of Ottawa. We have a problem, as you know, in Ontario with debt. We have $260 billion worth of debt, $12 billion worth of deficit, which means we're spending more than we take in every year. We have 500,000 people out of work in this province, and so we're in pretty tough shape. I mean, look at what they've done with teachers' union now. They passed a law for a 2-year wage freeze. They've already repealed that law. There's all kinds of other things we can do, and we would do as Conservatives, or any government should do, to reduce spending. It's not hard. If we eliminate the Green Energy Act, that'll be tens of billions of dollars. I heard Randy say one time a year or two ago, $83 billion is what it would cost in 20 years. Nobody really knows. It depends how many panels are built or how many towers are built. But that's huge saving right away. The wage freeze for 2 years of the public sector people would save $2 billion. And there's all the scandals. So it was $2 billion on e-health. Presto is about $1 billion, 700 million, whatever number you want to put on it. We have the gas plants closures, which is over $1 billion. Like you have almost $6 to $8 billion in wasted money there. So there's all kinds of money that we can save and put to better use. We don't have to be firing nurses. We don't have to be cutting health care. We can do it smarter. We can get rid of the administration of the LHINs and the CCACs, put the money into front the Orange Air ambulances. And you've heard a lot about that one, because we did spend a pile of time talking about that as a very public issue. And that one is still going to, the Liberals are going to be held to task for that one, because that is going to committee, and it's going to take some time, but there will be a day of reckoning, and it will come out that it was done for political gain. They closed the Mississauga gas plant 2 weeks before the election, last election, to gain seats. So they won all 5 Mississauga seats. So it worked, at a cost of $1.3 billion to the taxpayer. I mean, that's not just wasteful, that's corrupt. So the spending controls can be done. Healthcare doesn't have to be trimmed and pared. I mean, if we got to fire people, surely there's other ministries that don't do things nearly as important as healthcare that we could trim people out of, and healthcare would never be touched. Same with education. We need teachers, so we can't be hurting the teachers. We can't be eliminating teachers. We have to keep them. Possibly administration in the Department of Education could be trimmed. 33% of the hospitals in Germany and France are privately built and owned. It's still state paid for health care, but it's private money in there, and it's for profit. I mean, there has to be a return on investment for these people. Taiwan has done an excellent job of managing their healthcare system. Their cost on a per capita basis is about half of what ours is. And they have a lot of private money in their system. And they have a smart card system of paying for healthcare, which is just a credit card, which would have all your information on it as far as ailments, doctors, medications, billings. You know, billing and price list is very important for managing healthcare. We had an interesting guy, man and his wife, come into my office the last few months. He was director of Public Works Canada, so that's a pretty high-level management job of a very large organization. And so he came up with this idea of 2 simple things, that one of the things we can do to better manage Ontario's healthcare, to make it more affordable, to make it more accountable. He says we need, number 1, a price list. So every treatment or ailment, whether it's heart attack, pneumonia, broken leg, there would be a price tag put on it. You'd have, the second part would be a smart card or a credit card. So that would be for billing purposes. So it'd have your name on it, it'd have your doctor's name on it, and what procedure was done. And so it's a proper accounting for every patient, every doctor, and every procedure with a price tag for every treatment or ailment that was looked after. We have to now try to sell that to our PC party and to the government. As a society, we have a moral obligation to help those that can't help themselves. and we're not doing that. Yeah, Tammy.
I just want to say, Jack, I'm sorry to change a little bit, but that business what's killing me is this business of casinos. They think they're going to make all kinds of money and put millions and millions into these casinos, one in Ottawa, one in Toronto. People don't have any money, so where the hell are they going to be going in there and playing casino, all these slot machines? That I don't get their logic. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I can't explain it. Like, so Tammy's question is, are the casinos actually going to generate a whole lot of money? Like, if we build another one in Ottawa, are they not just going to take half the money of the one in Gatineau? Absolutely. And I suspect probably so. There'll be very little increase of funds.
Actually, one more issue on casinos. Will they actually go to a casino, for example, at the Carlton Raceway, rather than the one in Hull?
What's the question?
Will the casino even be successful in Ontario?
No way.
I was 19 years in that business. I got in well before slots. I was part of that whole process. And I can't believe what's happening. That was a pretty good model. We kept 16,000 basically unemployable people, their grooms and all that. It was a nice, neat little deal for them. And I don't know what, Jack, I don't know why they would throw a kink into that. I don't get it.
Yannick.
Two things, if I can just throw this into the mix. First of all, dealing with casinos, that's a symptom. It's not a solution.
Correct.
The symptom is the province is broke. And they're looking for every possible revenue stream they can dream up, even if from an accounting point of view, from a common sense, logic, and reason point of view, it makes no sense. There's only so much money in the economy for gaming, and they've already tapped it out. Now they're desperate, so they're trying to woo people from out of the country, like Las Vegas, to come up here and run a casino. The problem is the people in Las Vegas came up and said, "This place sucks for a casino," and they went back home.
I've just been appointed as Associate Research Fellow for the Arthur Maiden Institute for Public Affairs. Woo, woo, woo! And I don't even have any post-secondary, so I can't be certified. Anyway, these last few months I have been doing a lot of research, as I mentioned earlier, particularly in regards to municipal law. The only thing in the Municipal Act, the only power in the Municipal Act over your private property are property taxes. Section 2 of the Municipal Act grants them transparency and accountability and good government. Oh. Wait now, hold on a second here. Hold on. On February the 9th, there was a meeting in Cobden. Now there are 17 municipalities in that area. There were 11 municipalities represented at an Ontario Landowners Association information seminar to assist municipal representatives. You're wondering why? Our elected officials and their staff are being misled.
No.
And I'm serious. I've done the test with Queen's Park. Now, there's been a lot of talk in Ottawa about a property standards bylaw. I've done a paper. Property standards bylaws are to be implemented on municipal properties only. It is so that the municipalities are not slumlords. I know, surely, yeah. And this is the thing. It's a standard of law that when you have a piece of legislation, you are to read the document in its entirety to know the intent of that document. Now, property standards bylaws in the building code are under section 15.1 to 15.8. If you do not read section 1.1 and 1.2 of that building code, you're never going to know that the municipalities can't use that section to create property standards bylaws on private property, are you? The only section in the building code that says municipal bylaws is section 35. And it directs you to section 10 and section 3.1. But it most certainly does not direct anyone to section 15.1 to 15.8. This is the whole problem. The staff are not receiving proper information. There was an official plan meeting in the town of Mono. Some of the landowners got a copy of the draft bylaw for the official plan and the report that made the recommendations what to follow. They sent it to me. So I went through the bylaw and I went through the report, and I found the gaping holes in the report. Because in the report, OMAFRA does not provide information on how they determined their numbers. And when asked, they say they can't release that information based on the fact that the process is registered and licensed. So they haven't the authority to release how they determine the numbers. Well, if a municipality cannot double check how the numbers were determined, if there's no formula or any way to fully understand how these numbers were even created, then they cannot pass the official plan because they have not performed due diligence. That's the whole thing. Not only that, there are a minimum of 80 pieces of provincial legislation that municipal council and staff are to know and understand. Now, the Municipal Act by itself is 387 pages, and it's really boring because I've read it. That's one act. The building code now is 1,853 pages.
That's ridiculous.
I'm serious. I have read it. Do you want to know what the definition of an outdoor pool is? It is a public pool that is not indoors. And that's in the building code. So when the bylaw inspector from the city of Ottawa showed up at the woman's house to tell her she had to open her pool on April 1st and close it September 1st, I think the boy did not take the time to actually know and understand the document that he was trying to enforce in the first place.
I guess so.
So you have life, limb, liberty in between section 2 to section 15 of the charter. Those are the sections that can be removed by the notwithstanding clause. Now this is how warped this charter of ours is, this violation of Canada. If any provincial legislator decides someone with brown eyes loses their right hand and they implement the notwithstanding clause, it is a constitutional document and it stands. That is an extreme case, but it would be legal under Trudeau's violation of Canada. They have every right with the notwithstanding clause to murder someone. They have every right with the notwithstanding clause to steal from you. Why did we allow this? Why we didn't allow it?
Trudeau enforced it.
Trudeau did not have a referendum on this document. The notwithstanding clause was put in at the last minute. It was called the Night of the Knives. It was a deal, and Jean Chrétien was the guy that worked the deal with all the premiers. And you want to know why the 8 premiers took it to the Supreme Court of Canada? They didn't want property rights put in the document in the first place because that would give the federal government the right to legislate for provincial properties. So now we're getting into this. The British North America Act 1867 was our Constitution. I have been reading my face off about the framers, the guys that put this together, the discussions they had. Now, George Cartier was the Attorney General at the time. He was from Quebec. His statement was on the British North America Act, if this act is allowed to stand the way it is written, the French will be happy and they will be safe. The English will be happy and they will be safe. In 1881, the British North America Act was completely bastardized by the Privy Council in England. It was caused by political interference by a guy named Viscount Haldane, aka Richard Burden, who was a socialist. And this is where we can look over at Beth. Because Richard Burden, or aka Viscount Haldane, was one of the creators of the London School of Economics, the Fabian Society. He also went to school in Germany with Otto Bismarck. He also saluted the way the Germans actually did things. He is a parliamentarian who was with the Liberal Party in England and went to the Labour Party because he couldn't get the Liberals to do what he wanted. He swayed the Privy Council, he and Sir Watson, a Scottish jurist, swayed the Privy Council in 1881, and the judge's name was Barnes Peacock, and he ruled on a case that we Canadians know as the Parsons case. And it allowed the province of Ontario to interfere in contracts. They also were told to ignore all previous rulings in regards to the British North America Act. And if you want to know exactly what the British North America Act is all about, get Mercer versus the Attorney General of Ontario from 1881. Because in the Mercer case from 1881, the only control the province has over property and civil rights and all things merely local and private in nature are what belongs to the province. Because if the soil is not in the Dominion's regulatory scheme is illegal. Stevenson's versus Robertson. Our entire history has been screwed over by legislators with their own agendas. Now, back to the French language. In the British North America Act, federal level parliamentarians, either English or French. Quebec, French. The rest of Canada, English. There was even a reference done, I think it was in 1996 or 97 in Manitoba. And instead of using the charter, they used the British North America Act. How weird is that? But in 2003 now we find out that this charter, this violation of Canadians, cannot overrule the Constitution. So I've been on this little thing about, Brian Lilly was talking about how in the Senate, freedom of speech has been stalled because Section 13 of the Human Rights Code is sitting there because the senators won't make up their mind. So I decided to email every senator. And I explained to them why we need to remove Section 13 of the Human Rights Code. I got an email back from one of the senators saying that our inalienable rights are protected under Section 26 of the Charter and that our dignity is part of our inalienable rights. Well, my inalienable right is my freedom of speech. So why is someone's dignity more important than my inalienable right of free speech? I never got a response. But the thing that got me was Had there been a human rights code when the women were fighting for the vote, they all would have been nailed under Section 13 for promoting hate speech and harming the dignity of men because they wanted to vote. They hadn't thought about that. So how are we to grow as a nation if we don't have freedom of speech? Now, if you read the British North America Act, Section 94 of that act says that the federal government may make law for property and civil rights in Canada. The provinces have the option of not accepting it, but it doesn't give them or grant them any authority to legislate for it. This is the whole thing. And Quebec was intentionally left out of Section 94 to protect its own French Napoleonic civil code. This is why Quebec would be happy with their culture, happy with their religion, happy with their language, everything. And it's because of the bastardization that now look at what we are pushing against. So every Canadian, number one, top and foremost, should be writing letters. And I know you've been pushing on this for 40 years, and I appreciate that, I do. But if you aren't prepared to drop the ink on the paper, get it to the MPs, get it to your MPPs, particularly MPPs now with this new policy of the Liberal government. I don't care.
What new
because
policy?
Bob, the new policy is we are bilingual, period.
Is that a proposal or is
No,
that
it's done.
January 1st.
January 1st.
Yeah, January 1st.
The notice came out December 31st at 9 a.m. It was implemented January 1st.
Yeah.
It's up to you folks to get on these guys, write letters. This guy can't do it by himself. Tell everybody, because they're implementing this through your municipalities as well. All of your municipalities, all the public services in your municipalities are going to have to be bilingual in the province of Ontario. We can't afford it.
A lot of these municipalities, Liz, didn't even know it was coming.
I know.
Kingston. I informed Kingston. They went.
I informed Winchester.
I know.
Yeah.
Now what Tammy did, what Mark Henderson did, and this is where I'm going back now to Section 2 of the Municipal Act. Because the municipalities actually have to do what you tell them. Because you all have the authority to actually launch a class suit against your own council, yourself. But you can also get the pressure put on them at all levels. Everyone here should be doing up an email as soon as you get home saying, every municipality will have to be bilingual. Get the copy of the resolution from Beth and send it out. Let these people know. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not even good French. It's an entirely different French from Parisian French, from European French. My brother has a friend who's in the military, and of course, you know, he goes overseas. And they get right on him, the people from France. They don't want to even hear from people from Quebec because it insults them. So this is the whole thing. It's now up to you. You have to get on your municipal councils, pass resolutions. Okay, so we've got Tammy's, we've got Mark Henderson's. Every municipality that passes this resolution, and it keeps going and going and going, that is sending a message. But it's up to our municipal councils. This is why you elect them, to stand up to the province. Now, I've heard the term, oh, well, the municipalities are just merely creatures of the province. Well, you know, the old province pretty well outsmarted itself because they put in Section 2, that good government thing. It is not in the best interest of the people of these municipalities. good government has to make sure that the interests of the municipality, which by the way is just their revenues, and the interest of their residents are protected. And you can tell them if they're whining about not getting their gas tax transfers, tell them to take that up with AMO, because AMO is the one that administers the gas tax transfers. And the municipalities are to control AMO. Anyways, so am I done, Beth?
Excuse me, were you suggesting that we all email our various councillors and municipalities?
Actually, I don't want you to email. I want you to write letters.
Okay, so write. And,
Yeah.
and tell them we want it to be bilingual. Did you say that?
No, I want you to tell them the opposite, that you are done with the bilingualism.
That's better.
Not like that. What do you think, I'm nuts?
I was wondering.
Hey man, I ain't gonna be ducking from no tomatoes, I can tell you. Yes, sir.
You're saying so during prorogation, they
Yeah.
Yeah, they can actually pass regulations, the lieutenant governor.
during the prorogation they did this,
Yep.
and yet the population didn't want to see.
That's right. You wouldn't believe how many regulations came down the chute during prorogation.
So how could they pass it?
Because all they need is the lieutenant governor. And he's the bobo that rubber stamps everything. Yes, ma'am.
The Popo.
There's another thing that they're pulling. They want advanced French. And starting the hospital, right? You know that. Advanced French, not bilingual. Advanced French. So the exams are so bloody hard that no bilingual English person can pass them. So they get the francophones basically in the hospitals now. And that's start mad in the world.
Okay, so under the British North America Act, you as the electorate have a voice in that. So you want to know something? Okay, so we have Madame Mayor, right? Yeah. She is the Francophone minister, but she's also the minister of public safety. So what I did last night on Nick's radio show, I said, if there is by chance any liberals listening, I explained that our ministers are actually not telling us the truth. You notice how I didn't say, oh, they're lying? Tell them they're not telling you the truth, okay? They get real snarky about the lying thing. It's like this. They have told us time and time again, under the OSPCA Act, the minister has no control over the OSPCA. Oh, there's nothing we can do.
Right. They're all arm's length.
Well, are you ready for this? If I see a minister that says that, I'm going to say, well, then I best think you better read Section 22.2 of the OSPCA Act, where the minister may make regulation in regards to the officers. In other words, they are misleading everyone. Now, whether this minister has actually read the act or not, I don't know. Madame Mayor says she's a lawyer. I just don't know. I can't find where she actually graduated law school.
No, she took law.
Really? She's a nurse.
But I want to know where she went to law school.
Lawyer nurse.
So that's another thing. Find out where she went to law school and where she graduated from. Because I can't find it. And you know to know something? I'm pretty good at finding stuff. So that's the thing. A lot of them haven't even read it. Like, I look at it this way. There is not one municipal councillor or one mayor that can actually read every piece of legislation that they are to know and understand. And you have to understand this. So they're told to go to staff. Staff is told to go to Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So when Ministry of Municipal Affairs phones the legislative library and says, okay, where under the building code does it say they can create property standards bylaws? The library comes back and says, well, under sections 15.1 to 15.8. They don't tell them that that is all restricted by section 1.1 and 1.2 of the Act. It's the same with every piece of legislation. Every provincial piece of legislation basically has an escape clause. And that's the whole thing, because then they can put the complete onus on our municipal representatives. Well, if you have a problem just because they misunderstood the legislation and the intent and interpretation of it, you're gonna have to sue your municipal council. I'm actually standing up for those people that came on February the 9th. Tammy was one of them. Because they cared for their municipality. One fellow came to me after the meeting and he says, I knew in my heart there was something seriously, seriously wrong. And he says, I have to thank you because now I am better informed and I can maybe do something to stop it. Now, Brian Lilly has been doing a thing on Agenda 21. I have a document from 2008 done by an environmental planning lawyer. And right in the document it says they are to use the local government, the municipalities, to implement Agenda 21.
ICNEI. That's the,
They don't use the term ICLES, they just have it in there.
that's what they're talking about.
I don't care. It's not in that document. It is sustainability. The Planning Act was created in 1946 for public works only. That's what they're to be planning for, not your private property. It also says in this document that because of all of this process, our municipal councilors are wide open for civil action. So, look after your elected officials that are looking after you and get rid of the ones that aren't, and go to your council meetings. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends, get your letters going, and look after yourselves. Beth, am I done?
You are done.
My talk today is about the state of liberty in Canada. In order to make my point, I'm going to start by talking not about Canada, but about a news story that occurred in another country in the summer of 2010. And the other country that was involved was Iran. But it was reported that there was a proposal for the Iran Ministry of Guidance. Fortunately, we don't have a Ministry of Guidance, but apparently in Iran they have a Ministry of Guidance. And they were considering a proposal that would regulate men's haircuts. And so this was published in the newspaper. There's this guy, I assume he's the minister or something, and he's looking at all these different haircuts of men that would show, you know, how they had to have their haircut. It was even going to regulate the length of their sideburns, and they were going to outlaw ponytails for men and long hair for men and mullets. I didn't even know what a mullet was. I had to look it up. Mullet is when you ask the question, do the people of Iran have liberty? What's your answer? No. No. Everybody understands that that's not a state of liberty there. In fact, we would consider that regime to be the antithesis of liberty, the stifling authoritarianism that they've got in Iran. But the question that I want to pose to you today is, how does Canadian law compare with that? Well, we have something called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Well, that sounds pretty good. But then there's another section of the Constitution, the Charter, that you have to look at. It says, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. If the legislature wants to enact a law that might infringe upon someone's liberties, it has to pass two hurdles. First, if it's going to violate liberty under Section 7, it has to pass the Section 7 test, which says the law has to be in accordance with principles of fundamental justice. It's a principle of fundamental justice that if you murder somebody, you go to jail, and that's why it's okay to violate that person's right to liberty. But in cases where the federal parliament or provincial legislature decides that it wants to infringe on people's liberty, and it doesn't do it in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice, then there's a complete violation of Section 7. And the next thing that you have to do is look at Section 1 to see whether this violation of liberty can be saved, as the expression is, because it's demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So that's what the courts are supposed to look at when they examine the laws passed by Parliament or the legislature. Now, how would these two hurdles apply if some politician in Canada tried to introduce the Iranian haircut law? Well, if we applied the intended scheme of the Charter, first we would look at Section 7 and say, does this law violate men's liberty? And clearly it does, because it controls how people can wear their hair. And then we say, does it violate liberty in accordance with a principle of fundamental justice? Well, no, haircuts have nothing to do with justice. There's no connection between the two. So it would be a violation of liberty under Section 7. And finally, we would look at the Section 1 test and say, is this demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society? And I think everybody in this room would say no. It has nothing to do with freedom or democracy. It's not demonstrably justified. If some guy wants to wear his hair in spikes or a mullet or you know, colored 6 different colors, that's his prerogative. I actually think that what we need in this country is a philosophical revolution. I mean, you know, the problem is so ingrained that you know, we have politicians. Somebody referred before to, you know, Stephen Harper was a great speaker when he was in National Citizens Coalition, and look what he's done when he's in government. The problem is that the government is so enormous already, and it does things in so many different spheres that for somebody to go in and try and, you know, move into that and suddenly shrink it, it's almost impossible. You get caught up against, I mean, even within Stephen Harper's own party, for instance. If he says, I want to reduce government in this sphere, there'll be some backbenchers in his caucus that will say, oh, you can't do that because the people in my riding have a vested interest in this. And so he's fighting with his own internal politicians, and it is already so huge that, you know, assuming that any particular party or politician is going to be able to change it is futile. And there needs to be a vast philosophical revolution.